Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. I guess you're interested in GLM, in how to evaluate your system and your room acoustics, so this is exactly the place to be. See you in a few seconds. Yes, welcome. My name is Marcel. You might have seen me before. I'm regularly seen on this channel, and today I'm very happy to have you with me to talk about GLM in detail. So it will not be about the general things or the basics of operating GLM, because there's already a video and I will show you the link soon. This time it's more about how do you use GLM? How can you find out about your system? You can find out things about your room acoustics, and especially what problems can you analyze, understand, and hopefully solve after that. So I would say, let's just start with the well-known PowerPoint stuff. As always, I tried to make it as not boring as possible, but of course, it's really useful to see some things. And I just have a reference what I'm talking about. So let's start. First question, what makes a speaker smart? Because you might know that we call our DSP models SAM, so smart active monitors. And actually what makes them smart is that they are able to adapt to the room so that they can understand what's happening around them. Because you might have seen this in a real room, sound is always reflected. These few slides are from our first webinar about the basics of room acoustics. You can still find this on YouTube as well. But I think this is a very important introduction to understand what we are talking about today as well. So this is the reality. We always have reflective surfaces around our speakers. And actually, if you see frequency responses from the specs, so what we show in our manuals, these frequency responses are measured in anechoic chambers, so somehow rooms that do not reflect sound, because you have, for example, as you can see in this photo, large pillars of absorbent material that avoid reflections, and of course you also don't have a solid floor. This is more like a grid construction. These rooms are very special, so if you have the chance to go into one of these rooms, just do so, and you will be surprised, for example, how many things we need to, for example, keep our balance. For example, early reflections. And if this is gone, you might feel a little weak somehow. So I know of people who really got trouble in these rooms within 5 to 10 minutes. So this, for example, is now a frequency response of an 8341, exactly as we showed in our manual. And just look at the graph on the top. And of course, ignore this desktop LF thing, because this is an option. You can use the dip switch, or of course, GLM would do something similar. But the general frequency response of this speaker is really, really flat. So we are in a corridor of, let's say, 1 plus minus 1 dB. And just keep this in mind. And now I switch over to the reality somehow, because this is the same speaker. This is also an 8341 in my small room I'm sitting in right now. And as you can see, we still have a good linearity in the upper mids and in the high frequencies, but we are far away from being linear in the bass range. So there are huge peaks here. For example, this giant, giant summit at around 120 hertz. And of course, it would be really hard or almost impossible to mix on a system with a frequency response like that, because I would not be able to make the right decisions about the bass range, just because I'm not able to listen to it in the proper way. And a peak, for example, at 120 also is masking frequency ranges to the left and to the right side. So for example, it would still make it impossible for me to make adjustments at 200 hertz, just because the way our brain works is very also related to masking effects. And this is why it's almost impossible to work with a response like that. And I always also use a so-called visual comparison, because we always use visual terms as well to describe sound. For example, something is sounding too bright or too dark. So let's say we have this nice 41 again in white. And if I would be a visual designer, this white should always look white on your screen or on a print advertisement. And therefore, I would use, of course, a calibrated screen to do my white balance. If I don't do this, this same photo might look like this. So it looked white on your screen, but because your screen was not calibrated and had some color problems, the end result might look reddish or bluish, for example, on other screens. And this is exactly what's happening if you bring a speaker into a room. So our nice white 41 on the right side, perfect frequency response under anechoic conditions, will just get colored. So the sound will get colored. For example, if I place it close to a corner, there will be a lot of more bass. If I place it close to a wall, still more bass, but other interactions are possible as well. And this is why it's so essential that if you want to work professionally, and if you want to make sure that your mixes translate well, so that they don't only sound good on your system in your room, but on other systems as well, you will make sure that you work under conditions that are reliable. And calibration, of course, is a huge step to achieve this. For example, using GLM, because this is exactly the challenge we had for years. And this was somehow our approach to solve this. Because as you know, even our first speakers had adjustments for the bass range or for the mid-range. The S30 already has this. But during the years, we found out a lot of studios simply, for example, did not use dip switches because they really also had not been that sure about it. And then they just kept it at, the standard default position, although of course it's needed. So if you place a speaker close to a wall, you will have to use dip switches. And with GLM, it became way more easy to see actually what's happening to the frequency response and what you can do about it. And this is just a very short graphic to show you how everything is done. So we have a network adapter or our new 9320 SAM reference controller as, let's say, the heart of everything, because it's connected to the speakers with CAT cables and the device is connected to your computer running GLM. The heart of the processing, by the way, is in the speakers. So we have built-in DSP filters in all SAM models, in all SAM loudspeakers and subwoofers. So basically, GLM is only sending values to the DSPs in the speakers. This is why it's so easy to use, because you can, in the end, just save settings to the speakers and use them standalone, for example. You don't get any additional delay. You don't need plugins for your DAW. This is everything somehow just done because the processing is always done in the speakers. So this is a huge advantage. Yeah, and for controlling your SAM speakers, you can use, as already showed, GLM. At the moment, we are using the version GLM 5. 5.04 is out at the moment. 5.1 will follow very soon. And it's just done in a really easy way. You just place your speakers on a grid and you just create setups showing your setup. Every speaker will play back a sweep, and then we will have the red curve, which shows the reality, and GLM will calculate the blue filters to compensate for the influences of the room in a very intelligent way. We are also calibrating level and time of flight. For example, if you are using a 5.1 or an immersive system, and the speakers don't have the same distance to you, then speakers, for example, that are closer will be reduced in level and also will get some additional delay. This is the time of flight. And GLM is capable of also running huge systems. So it's not only possible with stereo. You can have up to 80 speakers at the moment in one setup, which makes it possible to use even the most advanced immersive setups you can find at the moment. And as mentioned in the beginning, if you are interested in the basics, so how to configure your setup, how to measure, how to calibrate. And if you just want to know about all the functions that are implemented in GLM, then please just check out the walkthrough video. Just enter walkthrough GLM 5 on YouTube, and there you can find half of an hour of hard work of me and of course others who did all of this stuff. And you can also use the chapter marks, which makes it easy for you to navigate to the things you are interested in. But I will not cover this now in this webinar because, as said, we have this nice video. Just use it. So we talked about the smartness of speakers, and now the question is why GLM and AutoCal are smart. So why is our calibration algorithm somehow clever enough to know the physics? This is how I would put it, because we do things which makes sense from the perspective of physics, and we avoid things that would not make sense. And this is what makes AutoCal clever. A question we get quite often, in GLM, we calibrate, so the speakers play back the sweep, then everything is adjusted, and then you get the resulting green curve. And of course, you might have realized we don't do another sweep. So we don't measure it again after calibration for several reasons. But please just trust us, because we did, of course, evaluate what's going on here. And just to prove this, I have done this myself with my 41 in my room. On the right side, you can see the results from GLM. And on the left side, you can see the results from Room EQ Wizard. So this is a freeware software which gives you the opportunity to measure speakers in a very easy way. And a lot of people use this software, also highly recommended to find out stuff. And as you can see, it's absolutely identical. The only thing that looks a little different here on the left side compared to here is caused by different smoothing levels. So in GLM, we are using 1/12 of an octave for the bass range to give you a high resolution. And it's important to see every bit here. And then we go to 1/6 of an octave above 300 Hertz. And this is why this looks a little smoothed out compared to these ups and downs here. Also, just as a tip, if you ever use Room EQ Wizard, turn on smoothing. This is very important. Otherwise, it looks totally strange in the beginning. You might already know that GLM is focusing on the bass range. So we are using our compensation filters for the bass range and for, let's say, the upper bass range, but not for the mid-range and the high frequencies. Why is that so? First of all, you might know about room modes, standing waves, which somehow are the troublemaker in the bass range in almost all rooms, because they just have the speciality somehow that you have a lot of bass at one frequency at one place, and then you move, and then the bass can be, or the frequency can be completely gone. So you can try this out, play back, let's say, 80 Hertz sine tone, and then walk around your room. And then you will clearly hear, okay, a lot of 80 Hertz, and then almost no 80 Hertz. And a nice way to find out what room modes are relevant for your room are room mode calculators. You can just Google that, or just, for example, go for this MROC tool, which is a really advanced and really cool tool to use because it shows a lot of stuff. Just enter your room dimensions, and then you can see this wonderful small lines here showing you where the room modes are. In the 3D view, you can see the maximum somehow the parts in the room. So for example, if I would select this one, this is now just a screenshot, it will display these maximums. And if I go to the others, you will see more and more blue and red areas. Blue and red always shows maximum. So don't get confused. It's not a minimum and a maximum. And they use two colors that it's easier to read. And what's also important to understand is that depending on the size of the room, there's a so-called Schröder frequency. And Schröder frequency is important because it defines somehow the frequency below which the room modes have a significant influence. So in most rooms, the Schröder frequency is around 200 to 300 hertz. So below 2 to 300 hertz, the room modes are really significant in changing the sound. And above that, you can also see this here, the room modes get more and more dense. So you have lots of them, and they also overlap sometimes, or in a lot of times. And this just means that overall, it's more balanced. So it's not that relevant anymore. And therefore, below Schröder frequency, usually this is the spot we look at. And for example, huge rooms like a concert hall might have really low Schröder frequencies because of the size of the room, and really small rooms, the Schröder frequency can go up to 300-400 hertz easily. This is also something you can see in this calculator. So I already talked about it. For example, in this room, the Schröder frequency would be 260 hertz. If you define RT60 of 0.6 seconds. Because this is, I think, easy to understand. If a room is very reverberant, then of course this changes. The Schröder frequency also changes. If it's really reverberant, you have more issues compared to if it's not that much reverberant. So this is the same room you see now with 0.2 seconds. This would mean it's properly treated, and you already see you would need some material to do so. And then you see the Schröder frequency is lower. And what's also interesting to see, I'll just switch back. The critical distance here was 0.4, and now it's 0.7. What is the critical distance? This defines how far away from the speaker, for example, you can sit and still get more direct sound compared to the diffuse sound field of the room. We also had this in the last webinar when I spoke about the so-called, of course, near field monitoring. And in every room, there is a spot or a distance where you just will realize, okay, now I'm listening to the room. So I have more, reflections and the diffuse sound field compared to the direct sound. And if I want to mix, and if I want to master especially, of course, it's absolutely important that you have a dominating direct sound. So usually in rooms that are not properly treated, just sit closer to the speakers. It's also about the size of the speakers, of course. For example, it doesn't make sense to sit 3 meters away from an 8330 if it's for mixing. You can still do this if you are just enjoying music, because it will work fine. But under the really critical listening conditions you need for mixing, you should be closer. This is a large room now. You see 120 cubic meters. And you see the Schröder frequency is lower here. And critical distance already is a little higher, just because of what I spoke about. And then this is the very small room, Schröder frequency up to 400 hertz. So the modes have a huge influence on everything below 400. And the critical distance is, almost 30 centimeters. You can do this with the ones, then it's called ultra near field. But this is a challenge then. So therefore, you might have heard that very small rooms, of course, are not the perfect choice for mixing. So if you have other options, then I would choose a room that is a little larger. Why don't we do anything in the upper mids and in the high frequencies? It's mainly, for example, because of the wavelengths. So higher frequencies have shorter wavelengths. And if you look here, for example, at 100 hertz, we have 3 meters or 3.4 meters. And at 1 kilohertz, then we have 34 centimeters. And at 10 kilohertz, it's approximately 3.4 centimeters. And you know what I'm talking about now? If I'm mixing, I'm usually moving my head. And if I would, for example, do filtering stuff between 3K, which is 11 centimeters, or even 10K, then it doesn't make any sense, because then you really would have to do, the dentist thing. So if they just somehow fix you in one position and you are not allowed to move. And this is not what we are aiming for. We want to give you a wide sweet spot that you can, for example, just reach out to outboard equipment and things like that without changes in the tonality. And therefore, it's really, trust me, it doesn't make sense to EQ all of these small boosts at higher frequencies. It will just make everything worse. This is just what you can find out by trying it out and listening to it. And as said, one movement of your head would change everything. And this is not what we are looking for. But if we are focusing on the bass range, especially below Schröder, we will get the clarity and precision because the bass is just more precise. You will also be able to just differentiate between the different frequency ranges because there's no masking anymore. And this is what we are aiming for. And if there are huge issues at the high frequencies or the upper mids, then usually you should just think about placement and, of course, also acoustical treatment, which is, of course, also true for the bass. So I will, of course, mention this again. Bass traps in the studio are essential. So, of course, you cannot fight anything that is time domain, that is somehow time domain related with filters. So calibration is a really, really huge help. But for example, if there is a mode and you reduce it, then the mode is reduced. But for example, the decay time of this mode in your room is still there. So it might still be the case that you hear a little bit of ringing because of the time domain. And for the time domain, you need acoustical treatment. I spent a few hours looking at different frequency responses just to find a few interesting ones for you to have a look at, because I think then it's easier for you to analyze your own ones. So let's start with something that is relatively easy to understand, which is also a response I could easily live with. It's from a larger room. Speakers are far away from the walls. And as you can see, there are, of course, these two smaller dips here, but it's only 4 or 5 dBs, to be honest, which is not much in the bass range. You've seen my response in the beginning where we talked about 15 to 20 dBs. So with something like this, I could easily live. And you see, it's also quite stable here. This ups and downs here, for example, had been caused by a desk that was standing closer to the speaker. But with a response like that, you could easily live. And once again, if I would now EQ this little boost, first of all, I would change the overall balance because I cannot do something about this dip. Very important. Yeah, we cannot do anything about dips usually because they are just caused by cancellations. And if you boost something, the reflection and things like that are also boosted, and you don't, you just cannot solve this. So if I would try to EQ this one, I would lose the balance of the complete range. And it also would only work fine if I stay exactly in my spot. So yeah, as said, with a response like this, you could have a look here. For example, add a subwoofer if you are really critical, or just move the speaker a little. But this response would be fine for me. What's also fine is this response after calibration, because you can see now we have some summits here. So the mountain range in the red area started. And this is just caused here because this speaker was close to a wall and the room wasn't that big. So we also had some modal influences here. But as you can see, the good thing is it's all peaks. So it's just the frequency is boosted. And this can easily be compensated by filters. This is also the main reason why we tell you, please bring your speakers close to the wall, because the so-called wall load, so the increase of bass because you place something close to the wall, can be compensated. And you might know that, for example, flush mounting still is the best way, so building speakers into the wall. And the next thing close to flush mounting is having a speaker close to the wall, and of course compensating for the bass load. This is the response from my room. You see, this also looks a little different because this room is even smaller. So we now have really significant modal influences. If you compare this, there had been a lot of things going on here, but now we have significant boosts here. So for example, mixing here would be even harder because of the masking. And therefore, without any calibration, I would be lost here. And actually, it would be really hard for me to compensate, for example, for the lower one, which is around 60, just with bass traps, because I don't have enough space here to have bass traps that are, big and deep enough to do anything about 60 hertz. I could optimize the 120 for sure, but at the 60 hertz, I would just fail. So once more, this is a good example where calibration can help you a lot. And now it's getting interesting because for the first time, we see a deeper notch here. And these notches are especially critical, of course, in the bass range, because if you are doing, let's say, pop, rock, EDM, all kinds of genres, all of these genres, of course, need a tight and proper bass range. And if I would see something like that, with really also is a little wider, this would make it harder for me, because let's say you would just have your kick, your bass drum in that range, it would be really, really low. And what could happen that you boost it and boost it, and later on you would realize on your master track, hey, what's going on here, because I don't have any headroom anymore, because it's just not happening. So you can boost it, and of course the speaker will play back it, but it will always be cancelled out. And this is exactly the reason why you also cannot work with positive gain here. It's just not working because of physics. This is another example. And now, as you can see, the dip is a little lower. Some guys, for example, could accept that because starting with 50, it's okay. And to be honest, you can work really well with a lot of genres if you have the 50 clean. But still, of course, it's not ideal. If you have a speaker that plays down, let's say, to 30 hertz, of course, you want to use the complete range of the speaker. What's causing these dips? It's just the so-called speaker boundary interference response. And of course, you can also be in a null of a modal frequency. This is also possible. But in a lot of cases, it's somehow easy to evaluate that it's really caused by a speaker boundary interference response, which just means you have a direct path of sound. This is here in green, from the front of the speaker to you. And then, because speakers are omnidirectional in the bass range, the sound will also travel to the wall behind the speaker, or to a side wall, or to the floor, or to the ceiling. But now let's look to the back wall. It's reflected, and then it travels to you. But then there is a difference. And the difference, for example, now is shown here with 1/4 of a wavelength. And we have chosen this because if this is the case, the frequency will be cancelled out completely. So let's say we are talking about 90 hertz, and then you have 1 meter distance. It would be 1 meter to the wall, 1 meter back. So in general, it would be a difference of 2 meters. And this would mean that this frequency is completely cancelled out. Here's a table showing you typical frequencies and typical wall distances. And you see at 1 meter, it's around 90, 1 meter 20, 70, 1 meter 40, 60. And unfortunately, a lot of people use exactly these distances to the wall. And this is exactly causing these issues. And as said, please have on mind, it's not only the back wall. It's unfortunately also side walls, floor, ceiling. So some things can come together. If you bring the speaker closer to the wall, this cancellation frequency somehow moves up. So it's just going into higher ranges, for example, 850 hertz. And the good thing is that in these frequencies, the speaker is already directive. So actually there is almost nothing hitting the back wall, because it's not omnidirectional anymore. And you see, you have to be really, really far away from the wall to get into a region where it's not interesting anymore. But as said, let's say you are using an 8351, this speaker really plays down to 30, so you will have to be away more than almost 3 meters. And this is usually not possible in most rooms, although you are living in a, I don't know, huge castle and have one of these fantastic rooms. If you're interested in these SBIRs, please just check out this nice calculator by Mr. Tripp. You don't have to write down the address, because just enter SBIR calculator, and I think this is the first hit on Google. And this is, it looks a little weird, but it gives you all the information you need, because it also includes sidewalls, ceiling, and also the floor. And this can be of huge help if you just want to find out, okay, what actually is causing this in my room. And because you have options, you can get closer to the wall. You can also change the height of the speaker, which sometimes can have a huge, can make a huge difference. Because, for example, if you have exactly the middle between floor and ceiling, in a lot of cases, you always see cancellations there. Once again, about symmetries and room modes. And then it's really useful just to change this. And also SBIR, for example, would be then the same sound traveling to the ceiling and sound traveling to the floor. And both would get canceled out at the same frequency. And then this dip can become even more significant. So really useful tool, make use of it. But what can I do when, let's say, my speakers cannot be moved closer to the wall? Let's say I have a console, I have them on my meter bridge, and of course I want to have them close to me because of more direct sound. What can I do? And the solution can be a subwoofer with bass management. Because the subwoofer has one big advantage: it's placed on the floor. So floor reflections are somehow in phase. They just add up, but they don't cancel out. And subwoofers should be placed then close to the back wall. And then you have options to find a really good placement for the sub to give you a linear response after calibration. What you can also do, actually, in some rooms, this is also giving you better response. You can face the driver of the subwoofer towards the wall. So just turn it around completely. Just make sure that you have approximately 10 centimeters distance between the front and the wall. And sometimes this can also help. Because subwoofers usually play, as their name is telling you, really deep frequencies. It's not easy to localize them. So a subwoofer does not have to be symmetrical between your speakers. You can easily move it to the left or to the right, which might result in better results. Once again, every time you are on a symmetrical axis, the room modes really love this. And so it's usually perfectly fine to have the sub in between your speakers, but move it to the left or to the right. What GLM takes care of, and which of course is really essential, is the integration of the sub. Because ideally, I don't hear the sub coming in. So I don't want to have the impression, if I turn on my bass management, now it's sounding like in a disco. I want to have the feeling of a full range system. So it should just play lower. No increased bass, just play lower. And to make sure that this is happening, GLM adjusts the level between subwoofer and speakers. And even more important, it adjusts the phase at the crossover frequency. Because let's say the sub is placed at your wall and the speakers are 1.5 meters away from it, of course, there are phase differences, and this has to be compensated. Because if you don't do this, you can see this in the graph on the left side, you will have, once again, a dip at the crossover frequency. And the moment the phase is adjusted properly, it looks like this. So it's a linear thing then. This is the only thing we are missing in GLM. at the moment, let's see what's happening in the future, that you cannot see the complete range of the bass managed system. You can see the full range of the sub and the full range of the speaker, which is, I think, even more essential, because I will show you how to select the correct crossover, and then you need to know what's happening in the speaker and you need to know what's happening in the sub. But if you're missing something like this, just let us know. Probably we can do something about it. This now also was measured with Rumi QVisat. And this is just how you see it in GLM. And let's say we would have these results. So you will always see the same subwoofer, which you can still see. This is from my room. The room is not perfect, so we have three summits here. But after calibration, it's fine. For example, I can really live with this really, really narrow one here. Probably there would be another place, but my room is so small, so I was fine here. And the speaker actually here has some issues, especially issues at 90, 80, 70 hertz in this range. And because this goes up to approximately 90 hertz, I would just say, let's go for a crossover of 90 hertz. So everything here is covered by the sub. You can replace this really not beautiful green line with the beautiful green line from the sub. That's very good. If the cancellation is even higher, then let's choose 100. Yeah, with 100, you can already discuss if you can localize the sub, but usually, as said, if you are in between your speakers, then everything should work perfectly fine. And if the cancellation is lower, you have the option to also choose lower crossover frequencies. You can still go, for example, for 80 or for 90, but it would be possible to go lower. What reason could there be to choose a lower crossover? Already mentioned, a lower crossover makes it even harder to localize the sub. So some people just prefer it if a sub just is playing up to 60, because then it's really not possible to localize it. And of course, if you have speakers that are powerful, let's say 50 ones that play down to 30 hertz, it's no problem that you can choose bass management at 60. If you're working with 8330s, I would not recommend this, because the 30s really profit from not having to play back the real deep stuff. So you will get higher resolution and more headroom if you stay with, let's say, 85. This is our default. We always suggest. So just to sum it up, look at the frequency responses of the speakers and the sub. So it's always, of course, sometimes you will have to do a measurement first. So you cannot know right from the start what's the correct crossover. Do your measurement, just choose, for example, 85, and after that, look at the responses. And if you then see the notches of the speaker, then just check out what could be the matching crossover. And of course, spend some time with placement of the subwoofer. You can, for example, also create a group in GLM with the subwoofer only, so you don't have to sweep all speakers. And then just, move it and measure it, evaluate the next position until you find, the best possible position. So this might take you, 15 minutes, but it's really worth doing it, because then you can solve a lot of the critical bass issues you usually see. If dips are higher, for example, at 100, 120, 150 hertz, and I guess a lot of you know this because this is a quite common frequency range, because usually it's just typical for a near-field system. You're sitting on a small console or on a small desk, and it's just about the angles to the floor, and then this can happen quite easily. Then you already know a subwoofer cannot help you here, a traditional subwoofer, because, as said, it only plays up to 100 hertz. Otherwise, you would start to localize it. We have something for that. It's not inexpensive, but this would be your solution, because the W371 adaptive woofer system has one big advantage. It uses two bass drivers, a 14-inch in a closed cabinet on the front, and then a 12-inch in a bass reflex design on the backside. And for example, this 12-inch is placed exactly above the floor. So there are, once again, for example, no floor reflections here. And then the best thing about the system is that GLM, of course, measures all of these components separately. So the 14-inch woofer, the 12-inch, and the ones pair. And then you can choose crossovers. And usually, for example, you can cross over with the W371 at 250 or 300 or 150, which is above the dip we just saw. And then it's possible to get responses like that, which are perfect in the bass range. Usually you only see things like that if it's a flush-mounted system, a flush-mounted mains system in a good room. And this is the big advantage of the W371 and the 8381. So I just showed this system here, but the 8381, our flagship 5-way system, uses the same physical trick, I would say, with the woofers at different positions. So then this can be fixed. Otherwise, if you cannot afford a W371 or 8381 and you have this smaller dip at 120 hertz, just live with it. It's not that critical, to be honest. If you're not working with sine sounds all the time and just sweep sine sounds through this area with regular musical material, it's not that critical. And always remember, as said, we are using 1/12 of an octave with it, which is a really high resolution. So if you would look at this, for example, with 1/3 of an octave, it's already smoothed out. And luckily, our brain is not that high res here. So no need to cry. Of course, get the W371 or 8381 if you can. I will be with you. I will do the calibration with you. Absolutely no problem is included. Otherwise, you can change the height of your speakers and you can play with your position. So you can just change your listening position. This can sometimes also help a lot because the angles to the floor change. Just then make sure that after you, for example, let's say you found out if I'm 30 centimeters further away, this is better, that you then, of course, make sure that you have the equilateral triangle again. So you will have to move the speakers then. Just forget about this one. You already know we could solve this with a subwoofer. Let's now look at a dip in the mid-range. So this system shows a huge dip of 10 dBs at around 1 kilohertz. And things like that should be, of course, checked because, as you know, 1 kilohertz is significantly important for all kinds of stuff, but especially, for example, vocals, vocal recording, and vocal EQing. And these things usually are also then just caused by reflections. This time it's not something behind the speaker because at 1 kilohertz you already have directivity, but still it can be reflected, for example, from something standing on your table, or let's say you have a surface that has a certain angle, or also a bookshelf or things like that. And to find out what's causing this, you can use our grade report. By the way, next webinar is about the grade report, which also gives you a hint about somehow the travel distance that is happening. Yeah. So, for example, we have this early reflection here, and then it tells you time in distance, which would be, for example, 32 centimeters. And then you can just think about it. You have, let's say, the reference is directly from the tweeter to your ears, and then there must be a second path which is 30 centimeters longer. And then try to find this out. If you have things, like I have here just hanging behind me, some acoustic panels or absorbers, it can also make sense, for example, just place one on the desk in front of the speaker, place one on the side, and if it's then going away, then you know where to look at. Then you could think about a different height of the speaker, for example, and then a different, angling towards your listening position. Or of course, just make sure that probably something that is standing on your desk, which is not essential, can just be somewhere else. And this helps sorting this out. So in the end, it's about reflections, which cause comb filtering. So we looked at reflections in the bass range, which also had, as a consequence, these huge dips. And with higher frequencies, It's a similar thing, but of course the speaker is more directive, so you can focus on things in front of the speaker, like also, side walls. And if you treat them with absorber panels, for example, these things will improve significantly. So summed up, even if your speakers are very smart, you should be smart enough to use acoustical treatment as well. This is what I mentioned. So we can do a lot of things with GLM. GLM can especially help you in understanding what's happening. But in general, of course, you should make sure if you are mixing professional and if you are mastering, and also if you are just, someone who wants to listen to music in the best possible way, and if others living with you accept it, you can just try out something like that. For a living room, wonderful setting. Yeah, I'm not able to do this. I'm only having 80/20s, and the only acoustical treatment we have in our living room is a sofa. So yeah, even I fail with that, but I could do a few things in my room. And what you see here is just basic treatment. I also talked about it in the webinar about basics of room acoustics with bass traps in the corners, for example, and you need a lot of material there. Otherwise, it's not effective for bass. So forget about these 3 centimeters of foam stuff. This is absolutely doing nothing. It's only absorbing highest frequencies, and it won't be useful at all. And then you have at the side, for example, absorber panels for early reflections. And luckily, it's then fine if they are a little thinner, so they don't have to be that deep. Also treat your ceiling if possible, because there are also reflections. And in general, some basic broadband absorption is always perfect because it just brings down the reverberance of your room. This was this RT60 stuff I was talking about. And a room, for example, with 0.3 or 0.4 milliseconds, of course, will just sound better compared to a room that has 1 second. And the challenge, of course, is always that lower frequencies already will have longer decay times compared to higher frequencies. And just reach out, to acousticians. I can absolutely recommend, for example, GIK. It's also the planner tool I've used here to show you this visualization. And they accept, for example, the grade report. So you can send your grade report to GIK, and then they can just make recommendations for you. That's perfectly possible. And of course, if you are, into doing everything yourself, you can just build absorbers, you can build bass traps. There are very good manuals for that on the internet. Just be aware of course, it's not that easy. And it's especially not that easy that it looks good in the end. But I know that, I'm not the reference because I'm really not good at, working with wood and stuff. I know of others who are really good. And the main materials that are used usually for this broadband absorption is something like mineral wool, stone wool. Some types of foam can work, but usually this mineral wool approach is a good thing. And of course, you can add membranes into bass traps as well to just somehow tune them to a certain frequency. But never expect wonders. For example, if such a bass trap helps to reduce a modal boost, which was 15 to, let's say, 12, so by 3 dB, it's already good. So also, if you want to use these active bass traps, if you reach 3 to 4 dBs, then this is already quite a lot. So still, of course, then GLM in combination helps. And if you just make sure that this is the case, for example, with basic absorption, then you can control early reflections. On the left side, this is once again from our grade report, a controlled project studio. There's only one significant, but this is also at minus 11 dB compared to the direct sound. And as you can see, it's really low then. And if you look at the second one, this is from my living room, then you have definitely more early reflections. And you can also see on the right side, this is already decreasing to minus 30. And here it's always almost at minus 20. So it's 10 dBs difference, which is a lot. We talked about direct sound. On the left side, a brilliant example. So if you reach something like that, let me know. You will get the grade report of the week award from us, because this is very, very well done. The red line shows the diffuse sound field. The green line shows the direct sound. And if you have a large corridor here, this just means you are listening really to your speakers. And what's so impressive on this side, how low he was able to do this. So this is, you have a direct sound dominance down to 20, 30, 40 hertz. This is really impressive. And this is the reality from a living room, not treated. As you can see, you are listening to your room all the time, except above 5 kilohertz. So this is then what's happening. Once again, from the same perfect room waterfall diagram, which shows how long frequencies ring. So you can just see this is the frequencies. This is somehow the gain or the magnitude. And then you have the time. So everything that's hitting this layer is longer than 500 milliseconds. And to be honest, what you see here at 10, I think this is the air conditioning. So it has nothing to do with the sweep. And everything else is so well controlled because it's not longer than 250. And this is, once again, untreated room, looks like this. So a huge modal influence here. So this frequency, it's approximately 70, I think, rings very, very long. And then in general, we have way more reflections, and all of these frequencies then somehow are present in the room for a longer time because they just bounce around you. Also, the frequency response is more balanced if you do good acoustical treatment. Also, once more, 2 graphs from the grade report. And important, these graphs show the results before calibration. And you see in a good studio room, you already see only small ups and downs here. And then once again, a room that is not treated, and you have significantly higher summits, higher peaks, and lower dips. Very important, I also talk about this in the GLM 5 walkthrough video. Of course, you don't have to stay with this complete linear target curve in the end. I would always recommend, of course, to calibrate, to get precision and to get clarity. But then it's absolutely up to you if you would like to have, for example, a little warmer sound, so a little more bass. Or if you would prefer, let's say you have 2 settings, one for mixing, one for watching movies. And the movies should just feel like in a cinema theater. And then, of course, there is more bass. A movie theater is never linear. And therefore, you can use the sound character profiler. And the only thing I would like to recommend to you is please always do it by reducing stuff, once again. For several reasons. Once again, it's headroom management. So if you reduce stuff, you are never getting into issues with that you could reach the headroom. And especially if you have systems with subwoofers, we now have the option of a little amount of positive gain for newer models from the SAM series, also the ones, for example. And so you could boost there. But why should you not do this? Once again, headroom. And if there's a subwoofer included, a subwoofer does not have positive gain. So this is just not working. And therefore, I would always do it like this. Choose the high shelf one, for example, and then bring down mid and high frequencies. And the result is more bass and more warmth. And of course, play around with the frequency. It makes a huge difference, for example, if you just boost, or if you reduce, which means that that the other thing becomes boosted. If you set this to, for example, 500 hertz, or if you go for 60 hertz, this is a difference. And especially if you're a fan, of course, of movie stuff, you can also just look at your LFE channel. So the discrete LFE channel, this has nothing to do with bass management. Also important to know, bass management means that the signal from left and right, for example, is also fed into the subwoofer, and then the subwoofer plays back everything below the crossover, speakers above. Nothing to do with LFE, because LFE is a discrete track that's coming from your Blu-ray, for example. Someone at the movie theater thought if Godzilla is entering the stage, we will need, let's say, 25 hertz sine sweeps, and this is put onto the LFE channel. So this is also important to know. This is also why we have now the option to only change LFE level in GLM. And what you do in your sound character profiler, you will also see, of course, in the filter settings of your speakers. If you click on the speaker, you will see that there is a grayed out area, which then says filters controlled by sound character profiler. And this, of course, is exactly, these are exactly the values you entered there. One more advantage of the sound character profiler, you don't have to do this for all of your speakers separately. It's just done completely in one go. Exactly. And because we spoke about this wonderful grade report now for a lot of times, I think I'm one of the biggest fans of this report. It was really funny because I think actually you are working for the company, but still, if I found out what this thing can do and how it looks like and how well it works, I was once again a fanboy somehow, yeah? Because you're just using the sweeps from GLM, and you can find out everything I have shown you before. So early reflections, you can see the early versus late, so direct sound dominance. You can see the waterfall and all of these things. And of course, this was possible in the past, but you had to spend a lot of time using something like Room EQ Wizard, and still it was not commented. And the grade report just gives you a complete report with a lot of useful information. So therefore, that's a wonderful thing. And because of that, we will have another webinar about this grade report on the 16th of July. So already, mark it in your calendars. And it's again 6 p.m. GMT +1. And if you're also having some problems in just calculating this to your time zone, just go to YouTube then and, for example, set a reminder, and then it will display it correctly. But it's the same time we did this webinar. Otherwise, if you have any questions about what we talked about today, please just send these to support@genelec.com. You can, of course, also leave your comments under the video, because this will be online later on. And we also go through these comments. Sometimes it's not that fast compared to using the support@Genelec option. But if you want to share your thoughts or your questions with others, feel free to comment, and then we'll check this. Otherwise, of course, visit one of our fantastic websites in your specific language. We already have some of them now available for you. And yeah, hopefully I could show you that we still follow our claim we have now for a lot of years, the sonic reference. A sonic reference is only possible if you can rely on what you do. And this is only possible if you somehow accept that the room, is changing, what's happening. And therefore, we try our best to help you with getting around, these tasks and issues. Yeah, this is the end of my wonderful PowerPoint stuff. And once again, thanks a lot that you had been with us and that you spent this hour with me. And I'm already looking forward, probably seeing some of you again for the grade webinar. Otherwise, have a nice evening, have a nice day wherever you are. Thanks a lot.